I've always wanted to be around that ever since I was a child. I used to walk down to the corner where we had an assisted living and volunteer as a child. And I think it was a craving for a grandmother and elders to be around me and bestow their wisdom on me. That was one. Disaster recovery, completely different story. I started figuring out how to do this well and get people back on their feet.
Welcome to the RAL Room Assisted Living Podcast with your hosts, Charlie Cameron and Alex Schlow. This is your go-to show for cutting-edge insights from industry leaders in residential assisted living.
Whether you're ready to launch your own assisted living business or looking to invest in this fast-growing, high-impact sector, we are here to equip you with the tools, strategies, and confidence you need to succeed. Get ready to ride the silver tsunami and change the future of senior care. Now on to today's show.
All right. Welcome back to the RAL Room Assisted Living Podcast, the podcast that brings you expert insights from leaders in the assisted living industry. I'm your host, Charlie Cameron, and today we're thrilled to have Claudine Ripert on the call with us today. This is going to be a little bit different of a call because she's not an assisted living operator. She's actually helps with disaster prediction and recovery for residential assisted living homes. So I think this will be high value to a lot of our listeners. And I wanted to just start with Claudine. How did you end up getting into this type of business and why the focus on assisted living?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's quite an honor. First of all, there's a love for the community around assisted living and senior living. I've always wanted to be around that ever since I was a child. I used to walk down to the corner where we had an assisted living and volunteer as a child. And I think it was a craving for a grandmother and elders to be around me and bestow their wisdom on me. That was one. Disaster recovery, completely different story. I wanted my kids to really start working at a young age, develop a work ethic. And we kicked off, it was more of a residential kind of cleaning service, then moved into commercial. Then we started doing pressure washing, window cleaning. And then we're very close to the fires in California. And when the fires kicked in, we had a series of them. Our clients were then asking us to help them with the remediation. And that's when we did a deep dive, really got into the trainings, the IICRC, the protocols that are proprietary to our industry, and really started figuring out how to do this well and get people back on their feet. Throughout the whole time, my kids have been with me. We grew our team. We grew again. We've grown into California presence and then obviously a national footprint now. So
That's awesome.
It just happened.
Yeah, as a fellow entrepreneur, I understand that the journey is never what's expected and you don't know where you're going to end up, but at some point you end up where you want to be, which is wild.
Which is amazing.
Yeah, I love that. Congratulations on all your success. And so your company is Critical Control, is that right?
Yes, that's right.
So in a 2 or 3 sentence description, what would you say you guys primarily do now?
Really, we're into disaster recovery. I think we've also layered in a tech stack so that there's predictive insights and we're not just focused on response and reacting, but really getting more of the insights ahead of time when there are perils like floodings and hurricanes, fires, things like that.
Yeah, a lot of flooding, a lot of fires in California. Yeah. Okay. So in your 12 years working with assisted living communities in California and nationwide, what are the most common disasters that you have seen?
Yeah, there's the day-to-day where there's a pipe burst, fire sprinklers go off, like glamorous things like sewage backups. And then I would say some smaller fires typically. That's more of the day-to-day response. Then there's like national catastrophes such as like fires and flooding, hurricanes, things like that tend to have a more widespread devastation both to the property and to the areas and resources and such. So the impact has a really big ripple effect when we have those national catastrophes. It's really hard to get lodging. It's really hard to get resources. Frankly, if your property has been hit, it's really hard to even get the help to get yourself back into the property.
What's the most preventable disaster happen, especially with the smaller assisted living homes?
Flooding. Yeah.
Flooding. In what way? Sprinklers or in pipe bursts or?
Yeah. From exterior flooding, like when we know that there's going
Okay.
to be several inches of rain. We've got a satellite platform that's actually free, but you can actually put your locations in there and get, these days with tech, you aggregate data, you can actually get amazing insight. So at this point, people can understand how much of their property is going to be hit, when, like in hours, when it's going to get hit, how much, by how much. And then even you can zoom in and even figure out exactly how much of that property might be under fire. If you've got kind of an extensive home or property, you can tell, is it just barely going to eclipse, or is it going to be something that's really going to saturate and make some impact? Even in terms of inches, you can say, is this a 7-inch rain? Like our California atmospheric floods, I don't know if you heard about those. We had them, they were literally 7 days apart, and they were 11 inches and 11 and a half inches the second time. So you could tell exactly that was going to happen.
That's wild. And based on that, can you know, does it factor in like where your property is in terms of elevation, things like that? Or is it more of like just location based?
Yeah, even elevation, the
Okay.
data is, it has both historical and future facing. So predictive insights. So yeah, it can tell you everything. If you're in a flood zone, for example, if it's flooded in the last few years.
And so the prevention method is what? Sandbags or what?
Yeah, then you would, yeah, exactly. And it sounds really simple, but if you have been through a flood, that sandbags, like I'm thinking of a memory care facility that we did. It was, part of it was assisted living, and then the other piece was a memory care facility. And we were able to let them know that the flooding was going to happen in a certain amount of time. And if we can make a decision immediately with resources being scarce, we actually had to go get sandbags from Oregon, and we're in Northern California, because there was nothing to be found.
Wow.
So this is the reason why making decisions very early on can be the difference between having serious damage and a claim and relocating, creating stress and all of that on the residents.
Yeah, it's important to have a disaster plan when something at some point happens, right? And you have an evacuation plan, but it'd be great to prevent it instead, because holy smokes, can you imagine the stress of trying to move that whole operation and all your residents and keeping everyone safe? And yeah, that would be really challenging. And then you have all the families breathing down your neck, right? And so that
Yeah.
that would be wild. How do you get the staff members to come with you, because they got their families at home that may be in the flooding situation or whatever situation as well?
Exactly.
Yeah. Preventative is obviously the way to go when you can do it.
Yeah.
What about the, excuse me, sorry, getting over a cold. What about the kind of non-preventative stuff? I guess I should say, is there anything you could do to prevent sprinkler mishaps and pipe bursts and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Every quarter, I think having inspections, there are so many things that happen. This really did not need to happen. We knew that this pipe was corroded under the sink, or that this sewer pipe, just from going underneath in the crawl space. There's a lot of things that we come across. When I pulled the data a couple years ago, it was to the tune of 30 some odd percent. I want to say maybe 30, 31 or 32% of losses that we have that were completely preventable. And it's, people know, and I'm guilty of it. And I know that my line on my refrigerator is having some difficulties, or then I know I have to have the refrigerator pulled, and I have people in my home for a few hours. And so those things get postponed. But when you've had something like that happen, and that slow trickle, and you've got yourself microbial growth, we call it's mold, and typically that's not covered in insurance. There's sublimits that are really low with mold, because they consider that, frankly, long-term damage, and it's not sudden and accidental. So it falls under neglect, not covered. And mold remediation is extremely expensive. So you've got these tiers of preventative, taking care of it if it does happen as fast as possible. And then you've got that bucket of just having it let go. And each of those buckets costs more and more.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to look at what the risk reward return is on getting mold coverage versus not, and other parts and pieces of coverage. Is that something you guys assist with? Is taking a look at the
Absolutely.
policies?
I would say we look at the policies once we're engaged in the job, just so we understand, hey, what are the constraints in terms of what's covered and not, because we don't want anybody getting into hot water and doing work outside of policy without them being notified. And if it needs to be done, it has to be done. You can't partially do mold remediation, for example. It has to be done fully, otherwise you get it again. But
Mm,
we'll take a look at the policy, understand working in the bounds of it. But really, if you've got a really strong commercial broker, they can really be your ally. A really good, strong commercial broker is really key.
yeah, I think we've had one or two on the podcast. Probably time to bring another one back to align with this episode. Why is disaster recovery and senior living different, or how does it differ from a normal commercial property?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. I feel like it's hugely different because of just the environment. There's just a lot of stress that goes on when people come into your property, into your own home. There's just a lot of stress. People are coming, walking in and out. And when we have a population that is just susceptible, and we're just, as technicians, sometimes we just get focused on the job. And of course, doing the job right is that's a given. It needs to be done right, and it needs to be done well, and it's got to pass tests and all of that. Completely get that. Check those boxes. But there's a whole other element when we're showing up. And I feel like that's where your periphery, as companies entering, as vendors coming in, the periphery needs to widen. And we need to take into account the susceptible environment. Like, this is very jostling for them. So we just may need to slow down and typically interact and let people feel comfortable, and often just let them know some of the stuff that we're doing, and not to enter into huge details, but just treat the environment with respect and dignity. And it's not
Mhm.
to say that you don't do that, in other places, but it's obviously so different when you're in manufacturing, where people are just on fire and you are just there plowing and getting the job done, because there the focus is getting production lines up and product out the door. But this is coming in with just a more of a gentle approach, and taking everybody into consideration and understanding impacts. So I feel like that takes up some mind space and some emotional space too, as we show up, is just opening up that side of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll be honest with you. I hadn't thought much about preventative until this conversation for homes that we're developing, things like that. Oh, we can get ahead of the problem potentially and make sure that we've got every inspections in our checklist, and that we're checking the weather, and we have our plans all in place of what we're going to do when something happens. But let's say I own a 10-bed residential assisted living home. What should I have in place before anything ever happens? Let's say I'm buying it today or next week. What would you recommend for me to do?
I would say a very strong inspection. I feel like that for sure. I'm doing some research on past floodings. Sometimes that's disclosed, sometimes not. And sometimes the past floodings, people would let you know what happened 5 years ago, but they're not letting you know what happened 20 years ago. And if there's something that we know with aggregating data, is that when it has a farther reach, you get truer input, you get truer insights. Even with fires, like we had fires up in Sonoma County, and 50 years ago, it was almost the exact same footprint of a fire. The hills don't change, typically the wind a little bit during those times, but it actually stopped and started almost exactly in the same footprint. So I would say when you're doing research, don't be afraid to go back several years to really get the full story. I would say as soon as you're in, is getting your vendors in place and then getting them at the table, because they're going to work for you. They're going to be the ones that are going to help you navigate when you're thinking of so many other things during these situations. There's just within the home and within with the residents, there's going to be so much to do. And if you've got your stakeholders already communicating to each other, and you've already created yourself an environment of collaboration and agreements, and then when something hits, everybody's working together. So you've got your stakeholders, your broker, your independent adjuster, your mediation company, yourselves, any other vendors. But everybody's together on this.
What if, okay, I'm in an area that there's a lot of flooding and I want someone to be able to call to do sandbags. Is it your company I would call, or would I need to find my own vendor?
Yeah, you could definitely call our
Mhm.
company. If you're at a point where it's sandbags and it's last minute, I just want to remind people that your chances of getting resources are put in a queue. So I would just say you probably should have contracts signed just so you're even known to a vendor. I think on the last two floodings that we had, we got 127 calls. Yeah. And so imagine for us, it's about triage at that point. It's who are our customers? And then let's talk about severity of damage and preventability. And then we're triaging again. And we've got a whole decision tree that we have to take into consideration because there's limited resources and then vast impact. So how do you marry those two together?
Running a residential memory care home is not just a calling, it's a maze of licensure, paperwork, zoning regulations, and day to day challenges that can feel overwhelming. That's why so many successful operators partner with Legato Living franchise. Legato Living does more than just help you open a home. They help you open it the right way so you can stay focused on what matters, providing exceptional care to those living with dementia. And once your doors are open, it can get lonely at the top. As a Legato Living franchisee, you are never on your own. Legato Living offers ongoing operational support from staff training and owner conferences to systems, cultures, and quality assurance because a home is only as good as its operator, and great operators deserve a great partner. If you're ready to open a residential memory care home that truly makes a difference, visit Legato Living and start with confidence today.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. It'd be easy to stock sandbags. It'd be hard to stock the sand.
Yes, and
Interesting.
shovels and yeah, and the
Yeah.
pull each
All
sandbag.
right.
Yeah.
All right, Granny, get out there and shovel the right. No, that's not going to work. Yeah. 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 Okay. Interesting. Here's a personal question because I have my opinion on it, but I really am curious about yours. Backup power, like a whole home generator.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that has a high return for when the risk happens? Or is it less common of an issue? If you're going to lose power, you've got other big things going on that's going to require evacuation anyway.
No, power is super helpful.
Okay.
It's super helpful. Even just for remediation purposes, even if you have had to evacuate.
Mm,
So first of all, it
good
can
point.
provide longevity in the space. So you can be there perhaps longer than maybe your neighbors because you have that. But then as soon as a company like us comes and we're needing to put equipment down, we're needing to just get basic power just for assessment. If we don't have power to provide and and the home doesn't have power to provide, then that again you start to slip down the queue. And again, I know I harp on this, but and mold doesn't wait, right? It's mold starts to form. Now you've got yourself really a
Mm-hmm.
mold issue and not a water issue, which again which is much bigger of a deal. You usually hit your sub limits within a couple of days with mold. So a whole house that's sitting is not a good thing. So I feel like those are all, to me, if I'm running that, to me that sounds like a very good investment for myself.
Okay, cool. I'm good. That you just validated my thoughts. It seems to me like it's a no-brainer, right? They're not too expensive, but if you ever had the problem, it would allow you to A, keep your residents safe longer, and B, you're right, the remediation will be much faster with access to power. I did see that. I was looking at buying companies a while back, and I looked at a water remediation company in Florida, and I went and I toured some of the sites, and that was the biggest issue was getting power for all the fans and the dehumidifiers and all of that. Yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like the number one question we ask. We're like, okay, so do you have power? Yeah, it dictates from there. That's like if this then that
Yeah.
question. Yeah.
What's the biggest mistake assisted living owners make, or any, when choosing a disaster recovery partner?
not validating if they've got the right credentials, if they're not certified. I think we
What
see
credentials should they look for?
IICRC credentials, water remediation credentials within IICRC, which is our guidelines. That's the industry protocols. There are rules to follow. It's a science. Dry out is a science. We have to take the volume, cubic volume, figure out what machine is going to be pulling water and humidity out of the air. And if you've got people that don't do that, but maybe their focus is something different, maybe their focus is more plumbing or, I don't know, carpet cleaning, whatever that is. It's not to say that they're not good at that industry, but this is very different. And yeah, they should have the right credentials. Also, when you're getting into things like fire and mold and soot, things like that, odor certifications are super important. Otherwise, you just get that coming back as well. So I think it's just validating,
Interesting.
making sure that they're sound, they're a sound company with that kind of experience.
Okay. Yeah, that's helpful. You talked about predictive technology and that you have a software platform. Can you talk a little bit more about what the role technology plays now in predicting and mitigating risk?
Yeah, I feel like it's huge now. And I think that being able to have satellite imagery and satellite data, especially from all the public and private sites, it's become, I think, even since our satellite platform over the years, we've seen data come to like pinpoints of information, like with certitude, and the number of hours in 18 hours, 27% of this property is going to get hit with 9 inches of rain. And just having that information, I think if I back up for a second, where people get stuck is paralysis when there's this chaos, when there's perils. We see it everywhere. We see it in when there are hurricanes in Florida, when there's hurricanes in Louisiana and in various cities, like just people not making decisions, just waiting and having paralysis. I really feel like that comes down to if you have data and you're seeing that, I think it's so much easier to move, to make those decisions. So I feel like it's playing a huge part in maybe being able to sit at the table or make a phone call and say, hey, your property, this is happening. It's got 97% certitude of happening. So these are the two choices. And we've got about 2 hours to make this decision. This is what the cost is going to be. If it hits, then, this is what the cost could be, the range. I think you have that information. Now you can move fast and it gets you out of emotions and
Takes emotions out of it because it's no, this is a fact. This is going to happen.
yeah, exactly. Because it's so great that we can go upstream now. Because usually in the past, we would sit at a table and be like, okay, so this is what happened. So now this is going to be the process. And it was just about putting everything back and how
Cleaning
great
up.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. That now we can save materials and it's amazing, I think.
How much warning would you have for any specific event? Does the software have that capability to alert people? Like how does that work?
Yeah, it does alert people. It'll give people, usually depending on the formation. I was thinking of the hurricanes. I was thinking of the flooding that we had. It gave us about a day and a half or so that it was forming. But when it's forming, it's more as 50%, and then it slowly creeps. And then I think that where you do have to make a decision is, I feel like it's at that 70, 80%. Like people will stay stuck on that and think that they're at a casino at a crap table and go, okay, should I just take a gamble? But to me, it's like you can procure $100,000 worth of sandbags, berms, tarps, depending on the size of the property. Or you can have a $2 million claim. At least you have real numbers in front of you. After that, yeah, you make a decision.
Claudine, let's say that I'm in a flood area. My heart's in Florida, and we have a hurricane incoming, and the software says, "Uh-oh, you're going to get a foot of rain." I'm not prepared for a foot of rain, or let's say that's a potential, right, in the future. And I know it's a potential because it's Florida. Hurricanes are always a potential, and I want to be proactive and have a contract in place for someone to come and put sandbags out when something devastating is going to happen. How, like, what accountability is there? This is just the way I'm thinking of it. Okay, I'm fine with paying for proactive, there's protection, but what if they don't show up? What is my recourse? And what does the contract look like to make sure that they fulfill in time?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I don't know of anybody who's got any recourse. Most of the contracts that I see, they don't necessarily have a recourse
Mm.
because we get into false majeure and acts of God and their ability to be able to even get to your place because the roads could be closed or trees down. Yeah. And then I would say that there's just this, if you're if we're waiting to make decisions and we have clients that are making decisions, when we alert them, we usually say, and we're tiering everybody, we're usually saying, hey, we need an answer within 20 something hours, something that gives us the bandwidth to actually hold those bags or put those on the truck or start that delivery. What we come across more is that people wait. And we've warned against that. And we're saying, don't wait. This is right now. There are 75 people behind you. So this is a decision of now. And most people get stuck in, do I want to spend $20,000, whatever that amount might be? But yeah, to circle back to your question, yeah, I don't know if there is recourse. I would just say that it's really about letting your vendor know really as quickly as possible when you start hearing about it and being okay if it also doesn't hit.
I got a follow-on question. Let's say I pay $20,000 and I put a bunch of sandbags out, and it does rain as much as it was predicted, and I prevent a lot of damage that my insurance would have to cover.
Right.
Is my insurance company going to cover the preventative sandbag cost?
We've seen a lot. So I'm not allowed to interpret coverage, but
Okay.
we've seen a lot of insurance companies do that. They'll even
It makes sense, right? Because they're losing less money,
a
right?
lot less. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh,
yeah.
a lot less money. The one that I was telling you about, this was a large facility. It was manufacturing, but we averted a $2.7 million claim. That was,
Holy smokes.
yeah, it's huge. You can avert a lot of money. It goes fast. This is expensive work to remediate. It takes a lot of effort. So a lot of times I have seen that. I've even seen them indemnify for those preventative solutions like a satellite platform and things like that for us to in our fire areas. The fact that some of them put up a sprinkler system with sprinkler heads around the whole entire property, they'll pitch in for that. As a matter of fact, I just walked a property 2 weeks ago where the insurance carrier came and was visiting also the property and said, yeah, okay, so you're in this fire zone. If you do this to this extent, we'll go ahead and pitch in whatever that was. I think it was $1,500 a month or something.
Okay. Interesting.
So
Okay.
it's definitely
Yeah.
worth chatting with your broker. If you're
Finally,
brokers,
some common sense for helping pay for preventative stuff versus just waiting till it's like what's wrong with the healthcare system. We won't go down that road.
yeah, that'd be
Oh,
fun.
Yeah. 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 I had a follow-up question, but I think I kind of lost it. Maybe it'll come back to me while you're answering this one. But what's something you're seeing in terms of trends in disaster recovery and prevention that we should be aware of for the next few years?
Yeah, a few trends that are happening, both positive and negative. The negative is that when we're getting policies, we'll always glance through them and just like I was mentioning before, just to understand where everything sits. Trying to think about how to say this. The policy, the wording, the language isn't always where it should be anymore. So I would say that things aren't as obvious. So caps and interpretations and things like that have gotten a little muddied for obvious reasons. And insurance carriers have gone through hell with loss after loss in
Especially in Florida and California.
California and Texas. And
Yeah.
exactly. They've been hit super hard. And I've noticed, and maybe necessarily your broker may not see it either, but definitely combing through that so that you really understand. You really need to understand your policy. That's the pinnacle. So that's changed quite a bit. Understanding that and understanding like the limits and all of that. And then I would say that people are getting more savvy in terms of we've had so many losses I think people are finally getting like vendors on board early, developing those relationships, understanding that they're not your adversary, they're going to be your friend. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
that's good to know. And then what about the positive trend?
yeah, I think that's the positive trend is the
Okay.
collaboration that's happening more and more. I think
Okay.
that before everybody was working in silos.
Good. Yeah.
And
Gotcha.
I think now people are a way more collaborative and understanding, okay, work together.
Yeah. One team. One team.
Yeah.
So we have
And we all row in the same direction. And then we have a triumphant story at the end. And it's not
yeah.
a horrible war story.
I did remember what my question was, which is when you've seen kind of catastrophic disasters affecting assisted living, what did they do in terms of moving the operation and replacing the residents somewhere else? Do you have any insights as to what a lot of them have done?
Yeah. So we had fires that we were involved in with a few very large assisted livings and one with memory care. And they had transportation contracts in place. And they also called
Good.
early and had the buses there and had people help them move.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they called in their staff very early and and evacuated.
Have a plan. Have a disaster plan.
Have a plan.
Yeah.
And also refresh yourself on the plan. Just every
Mm-hmm.
quarter, go back through the plan, get your people at the table, spend 30, 45 minutes, just go back through the plan. Things change. So then plans have to change. People
Mhm.
change. There's turnover, authority limits, all that changes. And so just to get back at the table with some level of frequency is really key. Because if we're going off a plan that was done 5 years ago, you can imagine how obsolete it is today.
Yeah. And I would talk with your insurance broker and make sure that there's coverages to cover something like that event. Is it going to cover overtime pay? Is it going to cover lodging for staff? Is it going to cover those kind of things? Maybe not, right? If not, I hope you have a good reserve budget and that you're planning, because at some point, maybe you only own that assisted living for 5 years and you get lucky, but like over time, disasters happen to every property. So
That's a good
you got to
point.
be prepared.
Yeah.
Be
Yeah.
prepared.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Having the reserves. Yeah.
All right, I got two more questions for you. One, if you could give every assisted living operator owner one piece of advice today, what would it be?
To give authority to your people on the ground or whoever your next in command is. So if you're gone for 1 or 2 days, you're out fishing, whatever that is, and something happens, have given them authority to actually make a real decision. So financial authority, like real authority.
That makes plenty of sense. Yeah, especially if you've grown a bigger portfolio and you have to delegate down. Yeah, yeah.
Come across that before, and the person was gone actually for 2 days. They completely out of range, and the person left in charge had less than $2,500 to
Uh-oh.
authority limit. It's
That's not going to do it.
yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Here's your
Yeah.
one sandbag. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a thing in the military called delegated command, right? It's like you give the commanders below the upper ones the authority to execute their mission the way they need to do it within the bounds of the bigger organization. And yeah, that's something that has to happen. It's not as prevalent outside the military, so you have to get comfortable with that concept. So I think a lot of people will have to just get comfortable with, yes, you have the authority to make these decisions up to this amount of dollars in a critical situation. But speaking of critical, Claudine, where can listeners learn more about you and Critical Control?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm on LinkedIn, I'm obviously under Claudine Ripert, and it's spelled weird. It's spelled Ripert. The French just love to do that kind of stuff. I'm on LinkedIn, and then our website is criticalcontrol.co. It's not .com, so criticalcontrol.co. Happy to answer any questions, or if anybody needs to get a hold of me, I'm happy to help.
Awesome. Awesome. We will put your information in the show notes so that folks can get in contact with you. Really appreciate you coming on today, Claudine. This was awesome. Very different episode, and it's got the wheels turning in my head about the ways we're going to mitigate and prevent disasters and hopefully have the right coverage for when one does happen. So thank you for getting me thinking about that. Hopefully I won't be up all night thinking about it, but it's definitely going to be on my mind. So Claudine, this was awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for coming on today, and hope to have you on again soon.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thanks to all your listeners.
Thank you for tuning in to the Raw Room Assisted Living Podcast. We hope you found today's episode insightful. If you enjoyed it, make sure to leave us a raving 5-star review. And a quick review helps more listeners find the show and more seniors get the exceptional care they deserve.
And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And just so you know, we have prepared some free resources for you to help you succeed in residential assisted living in addition to this podcast. Head over to theralroom.com, that is theralroom.com, to download our free 10-step guide to launch your first or next residential assisted living home, or our 10 reasons to passively invest in residential assisted living ebooks.
And if you're ready to take the next step and make real moves in the RAL industry, join us in the Raw Room Mastermind. It is an exclusive community where we deep dive into everything you need to launch and grow your own residential assisted living business. You'll get access to recorded courses, live calls with industry experts, a RAL calculator, resources and tools, like-minded entrepreneurs, funding opportunities, and an expert networking community to help you along your journey.
Be sure to join us next time on the Raw Room Podcast as we continue to explore the world of residential assisted living with more great guests. See you then.